Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and we're here this week to talk about G.I. Joe issue number 148. That's right, another episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated. This is the podcast where I go over every issue of G.I. Joe Real American Era, page by page, panel by panel, in detail. Some may call it excruciating detail, others may call it tolerable detail. I'll leave it up to you. For you new listeners, you want to go back into the archives, we have covered all of the cartoons, the Sunbow and the DIC. We've covered Extreme, and that's out there to be found. And then we've got more on the horizon. But of course, we're getting up to start our You on Joe format. Once we cap off G.I. Joe with issue 155, we're going to be doing going back to interview formats where you, the listener, are going to come on the show and we're going to speak about your singular favorite thing about G.I. Joe. What is the one thing that you love the most? And we're going to get as specific as possible. Slots are filling up. If you're interested in joining me as a guest on You on Joe, it's very easy. We do it remote. And reach out to me at joeonjoepod@gmail.com. Or you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at Joe on Joe Pod. Just send me a DM. Let me know if you want to be on the show. While you're on the internet, please rate and review on whatever podcatcher you're listening on. That always helps grow the show. You feel free to check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Joe on Joe Pod. And if you want to help keep the show afloat, that is always welcome. Speaking of keeping the show afloat, our fabulous sponsors, the Movies in a Meal podcast.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie. It's about not two movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben. And each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
And while we're talking internet, listeners, I want you to go to Twitter and I want you to find a link to this or go directly to eBay and do a search on this. But a friend of ours, Jesse Campbell, friend of mine, friend of the show. Jesse does a ton of great work with comic book creators, old and young and new. He's a great resource here in the Southern California comic book community. He knows people and all over America. He knows people all over. And one of the things that he's fabulous about doing is getting one-of-a-kind pieces. He's great at getting sketches, autographs. I've seen some of the stuff that he's gathered together, complete posters with, like every cast member of Batman the Animated Series, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, things like that. And then what's great is then Jesse puts that stuff up for auction, which is really, really cool. And in this case, Jesse's talking about, he's raising money for the charity auction Operation Santa's Helpers. And he has something that should be of interest to all the Joe fans out there. So the reason I said go on to Twitter is because I've tweeted the link out. I'll retweet it a little bit. We'll keep it up at the top of the page. But it is a CGC graded G.I. Joe V4. So it's the IDW G.I. Joe series. Flint original art Larry Hama sketch signed. It's also Mike Vosberg is involved in here somehow. Did he? Not sure why he's on there. Maybe he inked it, maybe? But it's a Larry Hama sketch. And it's a CGC 9.8, and it's Flint on the cover, and it's good looking. So, or go to eBay and search for CGC G.I. Joe Flint original art Larry Hama, and you'll find it. Proceeds go to charity. The starting bid is only $99. As if we're recording this, there should be about 4 days left on the bid. So if you're hearing this on November 16th or so, you have just about 4 days. It goes through. Yeah. You have about 4 days after that, 4 or 5 days. So please check it out. The money goes to a great source. Plus, it's a Larry Hama sketch of Flint, which is really, really cool. Let's see here. So it's signed and sketched by, I'm looking at the CGC plate, signed and sketched by Larry Hama in 2021, and Mike Vosberg on also in 2021. So maybe Mike just signed it or whatever. I'm not exactly sure, but it's all certified by CGC, and it's a really cool piece of G.I. Joe ephemera. So thanks to Jesse Campbell for bringing that to our attention. It's really, really cool. That's at J_Blue Cloud on Twitter. Very cool. Check that out. CGC G.I. Joe Flint original art. Proceeds go to charity. We appreciate it, Jesse. And listeners, it's your chance to get a cool piece of Larry. It's already slabbed for you. You don't even have to do the hard work on it. It's a 9.8. It's in great condition. Now, the other piece of little bit of business is, unfortunately, we lost Kevin Conroy last week. Speaking of Batman, the animated series, what an absolute legend. The voice of Batman for multiple generations. The greatest Batman voice actor, the greatest Batman ever. Like, he embodied Batman. You hear that voice, you're thinking of Batman. He transcended just the animated the animated screen. Of course, he did it for video games as well. He even played him live action in one of the Flash crossovers. So, like, Kevin, and by all accounts, one of the nicest dudes, just a sweet guy. Really, really great. Everyone came out of the woodworks to mourn his passing. And so I just wanted to take a moment to do that here as well. Man, did I appreciate his work. So if you guys are out there and you're fans, I'm sure you've already heard the news, but hit play on Batman Mask of the Phantasm, the greatest Batman movie ever made, hands down, with no caveats to that. The best Batman movie ever, Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Or, call up, or any one of the episodes. He did that voice all the way through the Justice League stuff. So his Batman's amazing. He was a great dude. Apparently, I didn't know him personally. I believe I met him once at a show. But just an absolute stunner of a loss. We also lost two other notable comic names. Carlos Pacheco, who I fell in love with his work on Avengers Forever. And then, obviously, he did a ton of great stuff. He did a ton of good stuff with JLA, JSA, and more Avengers throughout the years. But I really loved his Avengers Forever. It really caught my eye, and that's what got me interested in his work. He did a ton of X-Men work, too. And then Kevin O'Neill from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He passed as well. So appreciate your favorites when you have them. And, I think G.I. Joe and Larry Hama is one of those. So go to that auction and snap up that Larry Hama Flint. I think it'll be worth your while. Now, the other cool thing, I teased this a little bit on Twitter. I had a thought this week that I just absolutely loved, and so I put together a little mashup for you. Now, I was asked to guest host on a podcast called Cyclops is Waiting for Me. By our friends JC and Rod. Now, JC's longtime friend of mine from the comic shop, great dude. We've done some on-camera stuff together, like chatting comics and stuff. And they've been running this really cool podcast where they've covered similar to what we do here on Joe and Joe, but different. Where they cover every episode of the X-Men animated series. And I've been enjoying it. They do a great job with it. leading up to this, the 2023, I guess, release of the new X-Men animated that they're doing on Disney Plus. So they asked me to come on the show and talk X-Men because I love the X-Men, and I did an episode with them. I'll please check out their website or their podcast. I don't know when mine is going to air, but apologies for how we talked long. We went long. We talked long, and we had a great time. So I'll just leave it at that. Whenever I know the air date, I'll let you guys know. But you really should give their podcast a look. It's a lot of fun, especially if you love the X-Men. However, one of the things that it got me thinking about is they asked, what's the combo between G.I. Joe and X-Men, and X-Men names are absolutely the perfect names for G.I. Joe vehicles. Completely and utterly, it works. Now, of course, you guys know we have the G.I. Joe Wolverine, right? And I think that's what started my brain down this route. We also have the Maggot. There was an X-Men character named Maggot. But as you'll hear in this little next clip I put together, it really works for almost any name that you can think of as an X-Men. It doesn't work for their code names. It works for names of vehicles. So give this a listen. I hope you enjoy it. Night Creepers disappear into the darkness on their Nightcrawler low-crawl vehicle. There's Duke, driving the G.I. Joe Colossus. This shiny silver exterior repels any Cobra lasers. It's the Dreadnought Toad, hiding in the swamps of Jersey, submerged and waiting to strike. The Cobra Storm hovers over the battlefield, throwing artificial lightning at G.I. Joe. Snake Eyes and Jinx glide silently through the city streets on their Arishikage Shadowcat motorcycles. Look out! It's Tollbooth driving the G.I. Joe Juggernaut. It bores tunnels through mountains, making a freeway out of unpassable terrain. The Sonic Fighters take to the sky in the Banshee VTOL. Cobra better put in their earplugs. Spirit and Dusty cut through the desert night in their six-wheeled armored Thunderbird desert attack vehicle. Crystal Ball drives the Mesmero, an undercover ice cream truck that hypnotizes the unsuspecting citizens of Springfield. Zorana cruises the streets in her disguised Jubilee VW Bug. One flip of a switch, and fireworks spit out of this unassuming roadster. The Cobra Apocalypse rumbles towards G.I. Joe headquarters with its mobile Fang launch bay, 21-gun salute array, and expandable battle platforms. Doc swoops onto the battlefield in his one-man personal helicopter, the Angel. This mobile medical base saves the lives of G.I. Joe all over the world. Now tell me I'm wrong. I'm going to say Hasbro, you guys have the license, the toy license for these. Why don't you talk to Disney and Marvel and see what you can do about doing a mashup and, repaint an Awe Striker, right? And call it the Thunderbird. And so now you've got your Spirit and Dusty, packaged with this Awe Striker Thunderbird, right? I think it's there. I think it would be amazing. I think this is the X-Men crossover we've been waiting to happen. So I don't know. I got an absolute kick out of that, and I hope you guys do as well. And please, on Twitter, let's come up with more mashups, because every time I think of a new villain or a name from an X-Men universe, I can absolutely attribute that to some kind of vehicle in the G.I. Joe universe. So I stopped at whatever I did, 12. There's so many more that you can do. Now, don't say the Professor X or the Jean Grey. That doesn't count. And the caveat of stuff like Iceman, words with the name man in it, or Mr. That's a little, it's not really, those are kind of personalized names, but the names like Thunderbird and Banshee and even Mesmero, Quicksilver would make an amazing vehicle. It's all there. The Toad. You could even do something called the Magneto. You really could. The Cobra Magneto. So anyway, I thought it was a lot of fun. I wanted to share it with you guys. Please, let's have fun with it on Twitter. Call it hashtag XJoe, XJOE. Let's do that. Let's do hashtag XJOE, and we'll come up with all of our fun mashups. So now, without any further ado,
You were saying?
We are going to look at other comic books and movies that were out the same month as G.I. Joe 148. So G.I. Joe 148 is cover dated May of 1994. So that actually translated to March of 1994 in calendar dates. And as long as we're talking X-Men, we might as well go to May of 1994 on Marvel, on the Marvel side of the ledger. And we'll go to the X-Men. We'll see what kind of X-Men books were happening. So they started a reprint of X-Men the early years, which was a reprint series of the actual early issues of the X-Men with new covers and all that stuff. They would later do stuff like X-Men First Class, which were retellings of original stories and kind of like the stories between the stories, right? They weren't exact retellings of the stories we've already read because, we don't need those. We have the originals. But X-Men the early years was just a way to get some reprints of the old stuff into people's hands. And so that was pretty neat. The covers were always really good for that. I want to say that ran maybe like 13 or 14 issues or something like that. Maybe eight or 9, something like that. Psylocke is fighting from Mojo World. Her name is, she's got Spiral. Yeah, that's it. Psylocke is fighting Spiral in the cover of X-Men 32. X-Men Classic is reprinting a cool issue. It's that Kulan Goth crossover with Spider-Man, and Kulan Goth is the Conan the Barbarian villain. So this has always been a weird crossover thing because it used properties from the Robert E. Howard universe. And so once they lost the license to it, this book was, I think it was tough to reprint or something. There was always something about this, or they never wanted to reference it. They would talk about that adventure where things happened, but they could never get too in depth because it was really relying on Conan the Barbarian licensing. But now Marvel has the Conan licensing back, and I think I've already seen one reference to this battle in one of those issues. So it's neat. And the premise is that Kulan Goth, this Conan the Barbarian era bad guy, he remakes New York and presumably the world into this barbarian state. And so the X-Men along with Spider-Man have to team up and stop him. Speaking of X-Men Adventures, it's the Wolverine Omega Red fight. So this is the first appearance of Omega Red in the X-Men Adventures universe. So they're going, I'm sorry, this is volume 2. This is the second appearance, I believe, of them going at it. So that's exciting. X-Force, looks like Richter is quote unquote unleashed. Richter always needed a real name. They always just called him Richter. That was a terrible name. I liked him. He was a part of that crew of kids from X Factor, but he never really got a good name. It never really stuck. And that's too bad. Storm is fighting alongside Callisto in the sewers, I believe. Callisto was always weird because I think she was supposed to be a glamorous woman who got terribly scarred by living in the underbelly, but then during this era she got her looks restored, but it was never really overt that she was this hideous malformed freak before. She just had an eye patch and a scar. So they were doing this thing during this period where she was quote unquote glamorous and fixed, and it just was weird to me because it's not like she was like Mask, Mask with a Q, where was totally misshapen or anything. And if she wanted to be pretty, why not just have Mask fix you? I don't know. I don't get it. Can't say that I understood it. Having said that, she was a cool character, and I always liked when Storm fought her for leadership of the Morlocks. But then Storm would just abandon them for months at a time. So that's, good job, Storm. 4 Punisher comic books this month. Congratulations, Punisher. North Star's on the second issue of his miniseries. Night Watch has him. So we've reached the low of miniseries when we have Night Watch with the miniseries. I think he was a spin-off character that was a ripoff of Spawn out of Spider-Man books. There was no reason to have a Night Watch miniseries. There really wasn't. You'll never convince me that there was. Namor, number 50, he's caught in a clench with Sue Storm on the cover. Lots of flesh, touching flesh. And that's, of course, because Sue Storm's in the worst costume she's ever had, which is the one that had all kinds of like cutouts on it and was just showing all kinds of flesh. And it was really awkward and weird. I hope everyone enjoyed Namor in Wakanda Forever. I did. I didn't think he was arrogant enough, though. I want my Namor to be a real jerk, like a real royal jerk. Like the kind of guy, even though you know he's on your side, you don't want to be in the room with him. I didn't get that vibe off Namor. That's my only real complaint about the movie. I really enjoyed it. A little long, but otherwise, yeah. I want Namor to just be the height of arrogance, the height of, you're lucky to be breathing my air. That's what I want out of Namor. Cosmic Powers, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, they're up to issue number 3, and it's Jack of Hearts takes the center stage. This is one of those characters that was a B-level character or C-level character, really, when he was introduced in that miniseries, and never really rose above it. Disappeared for a decade, came back to be destroyed during the Bendis run of Avengers, but everyone who knows about him always has this soft spot for him because his costume is really great. It looks like a playing card. Costume's really cool, and he's got weird powers, and he keeps getting used again. And the word on the street is that he might get used somewhat soon in the MCU, so keep an eye out for that. Oh, and then this one, speaking of X-Men, we've got The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix #1. This is the time-traveling, like out-of-time adventure where Cyclops and Jean, their psyche gets thrown into bodies in the future. So Cyclops is actually able to raise his young son, Nathan, who grows up to be Cable. And so he gives them this, like in this clone body. So he gives them this, the experience of raising his own son, even though his son has to stay in the future due to the techno-organic virus, etc., and so on and so forth. Gene Ha did the artwork on it. It was good looking. And then they did a sequel to neither of these. I thought they were really good stories, but neither of them really ever lit up. Like, no one references them. But it is a cool, and it's a nice way to give Cyclops that, like, hey, you have a chance to be a father moment, because that was kind of ripped away from him, which sucked. So that's it for Marvel.
You were saying?
Now, DC Comics. What are we looking at? Batman's still enthralled in Night Quest. Speaking of Kevin Conroy, we've got Batman Adventures #20. Batman Spawn is now, this is the second Batman Spawn. This is the one that was put out by DC. The other one was put out by Image, which was the Todd McFarlane Frank Miller joint, which is the really good one that everyone that actually is like valuable. This one is it? I know it's Klaus Janson. Doug Menck and Chuck Dixon and Alan Grant wrote it. So 3 guys, brilliant dudes, but they all collaborated. Klaus Janson did the artwork on it. It's less, when I remember reading it, it's fine. It's just not, Frank Miller and Todd McFarlane. So that's why it's not revered. So it's always going to live in that shadow. This one's called War Devil. And, they're Miller and McFarlane are gearing up to do another Spawn Batman. I don't know if Miller's involved, to be honest. I thought he was, but McFarlane's doing it. So that's exciting. And I wonder if they're going to pick up on the same, like keep it in continuity, or just do a fresh restart. That I do not know the answer to. Green Lantern 51, Kyle Rayner on the cover. Here he is. Welcome to the world, Kyle Rayner. He was a good Green Lantern. He's a good character. I like him. I always like kind of, I wouldn't say he's my Green Lantern because I was well into Green Lantern before he came along, but I definitely liked him. Like, I read all of his stuff, collected all of his stuff for years. So majority of my Green Lantern, like in real time collecting books for a long time, was Kyle Rayner because, that's what was coming out when I was reading him. But I always have a soft spot for Guy Gardner and Hal Jordan, and John Stewart too. I appreciate John. I really love John's mosaic. They're all great. Like, yeah, I'm an old school Green Lantern guy. That's what it is. See, it's Lobo. So Lobo's got his regular ongoing book, but he's also got this month the issue 2 of the Contract on God, GAWD, which is like a pun on the Will Eisner Contract with God, and it's Lobo going to heaven to kill God. It's a fun series. It's pretty well done and pretty entertaining. I think I like the Lobo miniseries better than I do like the regular series for Lobo. Star Trek Special #1. Why do I think this is a movie adaptation? No, it's not. Written by Peter David. Oh, pencils by Rod Wiggum. G.I. Joe's Rod Wiggum. I don't know. This isn't. No, it's not a movie adaptation. It's just a nice Star Trek special. I like Star Trek comic books. I gotta say, I've read a bunch. I kind of do. They're kind of fun. I'm a late life Trekker, so I'm, you know me. Doomsday Hunter Prey is out. If you guys missed it, last week was the Superman 30th anniversary special that was on the stands by a lot of the original creative team. I'm working my way through it, enjoying it so far. Celebrate all things related to the death of Superman. It's really, really solid and really, really, really good. So that's it for DC Comics.
You were saying?
And now we're going to look at the movie theater. So, March 1994. Let's see here. Gina Davis. There's a bunch of middle of the road. Let's try to get. Let me rewind real quick to see what was big. Last month was pretty bland. So the bland continues. Got a movie called Angie with Gina Davis in it. The Chase with Charlie Sheen and Christy Swanson. There you go. That's your movie for the kids. China Moon, Greedy, and Sirens. I can say I've never seen any of those. I've never even really seen The Chase. On the 9th, though, this was actually a really big hit. 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and I'm pretty sure it was a surprise hit. So I can't say that they probably didn't program for it, but people loved 4 Weddings and a Funeral. Hugh Grant and Andy McDowell, right? Yeah, as they go to literally 4 Weddings and a Funeral, fall in love, blah blah blah. But yeah, people love that movie. On March 11th, with Nicolas Cage guarding Tess as the Secret Service guy that's in charge of the First Lady, and same day the Hudsucker Proxy. It's a Coen Brothers movie. Tim Robbins, Jennifer Jason Leigh, but most importantly Paul Newman, and it is about big business. It takes place during the Wall Street crash. It's fabulous, absolutely great. Oh, Sam Raimi co-wrote the script. I didn't know that. It's just a great movie. I love Paul Newman. I recommend this movie if you've never seen it. It's about, the gag of it is the creation of the hula hoop, but it's just about lying and manipulating and big business and things like that. Hudsucker Proxy is absolutely fantastic. You've also got the black comedy The Ref, starring Dennis Leary, Judy Davis, and Kevin Spacey. And what's it? He takes hostage the family and holds them in the basement. And I don't remember why it's called The Ref. Something with the refereeing. I don't remember, but I do remember that movie. Monkey Trouble with Thora Birch, Harvey Keitel, Mimi Rogers, Christopher McDonald, about her monkey that gets into trouble. I love monkey movies. I recommend Monkey Trouble just because I love monkey movies. That's it. Naked Gun 33 1/3 came out, The Final Insult. I recall going in college going to see this movie together, and we all hated it. And when we came back to the dorms, I do remember this. It was because getting a car was hard. Going to see a movie like this, we all gathered someone who had a car, piled in, went to see Naked Gun 33 1/3, did not enjoy it, came back, went to dinner, and during dinner, I absolutely recall I made a sandwich and the bread was moldy, and I think I bit into it, but it was either way. It was a disgusting experience of finding the moldy bread. So it was on top of Naked Gun 33 1/3. I also had moldy bread, so I took that bread and I put that in the suggestion box for the cafeteria. You're welcome, University of Illinois. March 25th. Above the Rim. Basketball drama. Also D2, The Mighty Ducks. So that was a sports day drama, apparently. And then on the 30th, Jimmy Hollywood with Joe Pesci, Christian Slater, and Major League 2, which was not as funny as Major League 1. And then the Don Bluth movie Thumbelina. So yeah, so that's what was in the theaters.
You were saying?
Same time as G.I. Joe 148, and now.
Now, mass is ready.
All right. Star Brigade, G.I. Joe 148 versus the Legion of the Unliving. If you recall where we left off, the G.I. Joe Star Brigade was in space, literally on an actual asteroid, hurtling towards Earth, and they had to fend off an army of unkillable zombie robots. Think battle android troopers on steroids. These robots were created by a mad Russian scientist, sent to this asteroid in the first place to weaponize it and send it hurtling towards Earth to destroy, whatever sovereign nation, etc. And then they lost control of it. So the Soviets and the Joes teamed up, the October Guard, of course, teamed up with the Joes to stop this. And so it's kind of like Armageddon, except 4 years before Armageddon. So Michael Bay, I see where you got the idea. Larry Hammond's going to sue somebody. So cover by Phil Goss here. And I believe it's R.E. I don't know who the inker on that is, but it's great. It's a fun cover. These space covers have been really good. This one is Roadblock caught in the pincers of, it's a moment in the scene later of the robot's answer to the Joe's combat droid. It's like a walker, like those load lifters from the movie Aliens that Ripley, commandeers. It's like a bigger version of that. That's essentially what Roadblock is being pinched here with. He's firing. There's a lot of action with there's good stuff on the cover. His face looks absolutely terrified. He's shooting at droids while being hauled off by a giant pincer arm, and in the background you see even more lasers shooting up in the sky. That that fills out the space, gives us tells us that there's even more going on in the battlefield. Really smart. If you think about it, remove those lasers, and then it's just a story about Roadblock. You keep the lasers in there, and then it's a story about that. It's a bigger pitched battle. So that's really, really cool. The only issue here is one of them, there's a mistake on the cover, is on the right-hand side, the bolt of laser that's heading, so there's three lasers. There's one on the left, one in the middle, and the one on the right. The right-hand laser, you should be visible through the pincers, and it's not, and then it's covered up by space where you should be seeing it. And then it also should be going past the robot, because I think maybe they thought it was coming out of the robot's eyes, but it's not coming out of the robot's eyes. It's actually coming from the ground. So right above the box, the direct edition box in the corner, you should see some of the red behind the robot, but instead you have black space. So a little bit of a layout error there. Fix it in Photoshop today, of course. But otherwise, it's a great cover. I really like it. And, here we go.
Yo, Joe!
2,000 feet over Volkukuk land. Irresistible Forces, script by Larry Hama, pencils by Phil Gossier, and inks by Crusher Wallace. And welcome aboard Scott Koblish. Now, Scott, if you guys don't know him, is fantastic. He actually, I got the pleasure of meeting him a few times out here. We're slightly friendly, I would say. And just a sweet dude, really great dude, and someone who has over the years blossomed into his own, especially as a dynamite penciler. He's doing a ton of stuff at Marvel these days. This had to be one of his early assignments, inking, and he's a real talent. He did the he inked the cover for the G.I. Joe Todd McFarlane special edition. So this is not for Scott's first time on G.I. Joe. This is actually tech, because that came out like a couple years prior to this. So that's exciting. Coloring by Bob Sharon, lettering by Vicky Williams and John Badcock. An editor, Mike Lackey, and editor-in-chief, Tom DeFalco. It's a great splash page. It's funny, though, like, it doesn't look like it's Flint and Lady J, and they're leaping out the back of a C-130 parachuting. They have parachutes on, but they're not deployed yet. But they are leaping not as if they're actually doing parachuting. They look like they're jumping into the fray. They both have their guns held into their hands. There are straps drawn on the gun, but that strap is not around Flint. So Flint is just like, I'm going to hold on to this. They're like, they don't look like they're parachuting. Lady J is holding actually a scarlet-like crossbow, which is interesting. And they're both going like feet first out of this airplane. They do not in any way, shape, or form look like they're leaping to then parachute. But it makes for a great action scene. It makes for a great splash page. But it is, they're ready to go. I don't understand how Flint would hold on to either of those weapons and still have a hand to pull his cord. So that's hilarious. You do have the asteroid that's drawn in panel here. So that's a little reminder. It looks a little strange because it's kind of the same color as the moon. It's got a weird, like ovally diamond shape to it. So it's not exactly, if you didn't know there was an asteroid in this, you wouldn't know that that's what that was. It just looks like a weird shape in the sky. So that's a little, I would say that's a little awkward. Maybe choose, I don't know, maybe just go with different color or something. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to address that one. But having said that, like the characters are rendered great and all. It's just funny because they are not parachuting.
Yo, Joe!
Except when you get to this panel and, you see them landing in the LZ, as they're saying. So they're going there to meet their contact. And their contact, of course, is Stalker. Stalker uses night vision to kind of flash them. The recognition signal is, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this. I will try, but it's going to be wrong. Ash-Naz Simbotul. And the countersign is Ash-Naz Durbatulik. Whatever that means. They say, betting that the Cobras don't speak Orcish. Oh, that's hilarious. So that must be from Lord of the Rings. That's absolutely hilarious. I am imagining, I would bet you that's a legit. Hold on, we're going to Google this. This is hilarious. So it absolutely is Orcish. And Stalker, the recognition symbol is, it's from the One Ring. So he says, Gimbatul. So he says, I think they actually got a little bit out of order. So Stalker says One Ring to find them, which is Aknaj Gimbatul, and the counter size is the Durbatalik, which is One Ring to rule them all. So it's out of order, but it's pretty funny. So so basically Stalker says One Ring to find them, and Flint replies back, the One Ring to rule them all. That's awesome. So Duke Hawk rather, and Flint welcome them to their little holding pattern, as they like to say. So if you guys remember, there was that ambush. They caught Cobra unaware, so Cobra had to retreat. But we're going to learn here that the Joes and the people of Wuklukluk land aren't very well suited for a long holdout. But the Joes here remind us that it doesn't matter how long the holdout's going to be, because the asteroid is going to kill them all in about 12 hours.
Yo, Joe!
So on the hurtling asteroid, we've got the Star Brigade, and saying they're reminding us that if we don't blast our way down to the control center at the bottom of this ramp, there's no stopping the asteroid. And it says Duke and Red Star. And the G.I. Joe armor bots are making their moves. You guys remember basically last time they recouped and they said, well, we may not make it off this rock, but we have to stop the rock. Otherwise, can't stop the rock. Otherwise, everyone on Earth is going to die. So let's just make one concerted effort and get to the control panel, which is where like the self-destruct is. So that'll, destroy the asteroid. And meanwhile, Duke calls the space shuttle and says, well, we're in a lot of trouble. I love the detail on this page. Remember last issue, we had a lot of inkers, and it seemed like layouts were by Phil. This is not the case in this issue. This whole issue is great. I really, really like it. There's a lot of solid detail in the backgrounds, a lot of atmosphere in Woklukuk land. And I hate having to say that because I know I'm getting it wrong. It's at night, so there's just a lot of deep shadows. He does a really good job of that. On the asteroid, it's like these flares of bright light that illuminate certain things, but then it goes black, because there's no surface to reflect off of, right? So there's just these bright illuminated vehicles, and then in the distance, the light just fades off to nothing because they are in deep space. So it's good, it's strong, and like for example, this picture of Duke at the bottom of this page, where you have the gun breaking the panel barrier, and they're smart enough to leave it open on the right side, which actually really visually carries you to the next page.
Yo, Joe!
So that's a pretty neat little trick. Again, if you're looking and watching with it, imagine that being flipped the other way and Duke shooting the other direction. It doesn't carry you across as much as it does having Duke shoot towards the page, the direction that you're turning the page. And he's talking to the guys on the shuttle. So Payload replies back, and this catches you up on where they're at. Payload and Dragonsky, they're cannibalizing the G.I. Joe Defiant to patch up the Russian shuttle. And this is a great, I really, really like this. Dragonsky says, fortunately, much of our technology was stolen from you, so many of the parts match up. So it's hilarious. Like I love that. And it explains how it's, they can just kind of cobble together patches on a space shuttle. But as they're there, they realize they're surrounded by these Cylon-looking robots, and they really do. They really look like old school Cylons. Actually, let me change that. They don't look like old school Cylons. They actually do look like the revamped Cylons from the early 2000 Battlestar, because they were more, they were all CGI, right? So they didn't have to have a person in them. So they made them more mechanical. Like you wouldn't have the full body padding on a Cylon if you didn't need it. You would just have like a spine in the middle. And these actually do look a lot more like the CGI Cylons from the second thing. Now, before we go to the next page, there is a next page here. And I don't remember seeing this ad. I want to know, I promise you. Listen, I'm going to say this, and then Mike Irizarry from What's on Joe Mind, I know you're going to ping me, and you're going to say, of course, I subscribe to Headquarters Monthly. There is a full-page ad. I don't remember this at all. It says, if you collect G.I. Joe, Headquarters Quarterly is a must magazine for you, and it is a G.I. Joe fan magazine, fanzine. It touts, there's coloring contests, there's photo contests. The image they have here is a fun, like almost Fred Hembeck style cartoon celebrating 30 years of G.I. Joe, with a birthday cake, and it's got Joes from all eras going back to the 12-inch. It's issue number 8 from fall of 1994. It's the magazine for G.I. Joe collectors, and you if you want to subscribe, you fill this form out, send a check or money order to a gentleman by the name of Joe Bodnerchuk out of Kenmore, New York. Now, I hope Joe's still out there, because I'm sure he's still a Joe fan. But yeah, so that's really cool. So a subscription is $20 a year, or if you just want a singular issue, you can just send him $6. Sorry, and Shirley's very excited about this. So did anyone subscribe to Headquarters? Joe Bodnerchuk, are you out there in the listening audience? Reach out and let me know. And Mike Irizarry, I'm sure you're going to be all over this.
Yo, Joe!
In Volkukuk land, it's still nighttime. All the vehicles are covered up, which is a neat little detail they showed here. And we get filled in on the situation here that if the world doesn't end in the next hour, so actually they have less than an hour really with the asteroid, they're going to be overrun by Cobra because they're all out of gas. As Stalker said, there's no go juice. The tanks can't even traverse their turrets without the big diesels getting cranked up. And when they retreated from that border, they used up all their gas. So they're in a little bit of a pickle, as they like to say. And Flint, says, we just parachuted into this cluster, foul up, just so we could be in on the receiving end of a massacre while the world gets KO'd by an asteroid. That's awesome. Just how did we get stuck with the job of advising that clown General Liederkrantz anyway. So he's talking trash about Liederkrantz. Meanwhile, Liederkrantz is standing right over his shoulder, which Lady Jace whispers that. And I don't think, this was great, I don't think Flint cares. He really doesn't. But Liederkrantz says, you're advising me because it behooves you to have a buffer between the free world and Cobra. And as for Wolfgang, I was just coming to tell you that the little vermin has disappeared with the mess fund. The mess fund. So I guess they're spending money. His little assistant has taken off with it.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, back on the asteroid, the guys Duke and Dragonsky or I'm sorry, it was Payload and Dragonsky are flanked by these Cylons, really. But the Cylons aren't attacking because they're, and he says, but why aren't they? They've attacked us every other time. And he says, maybe I should put down this wrench and reach over for my laser rifle. And as he does that, all the robots pick up their lasers and point their lasers at the vehicle. And so Dragonsky realizes it and yells, pick up the tool, pick the tool back up. So he's screaming at him. So he realizes what's going on. I like that they have Dragonsky make the realization, like, it doesn't have to be a Joe that makes this connection.
Yo, Joe!
We got a Bullpen's bulletin page here. Oh, some games here. Interesting. So now on the ramp that leads to the asteroid control center, the Joes are really in a pickle, and this is where this giant loader, it's bigger than the one they used in Aliens, but it's kind of like that, like a heavy lifter loader thing comes into play. It's a construction drone, and Roadblock goes at it with his dual laser guns. I love the rendering on this. He really looks good, and what Phil does a nice job with throughout this, because they're all in helmets and they're different. Everyone has a different style of helmet, but they're able to get the facial features with acting within the helmet, so we can see emotions and we can see acting, through these helmets. But all the helmets are different. And in the Roblox case, he's got that round bubble, like an old school kind of space helmet, and they really do a great job. It's kind of like a Mesmero a little bit helmet of just rendering. I mean, everything looks really sharp on it. I'm not even joking. I think it's really great. So he gets picked up by that loader, very much like Ripley in Aliens.
Yo, Joe!
But not for long, because Lieutenant Gorky in the Cobra combat drone comes along and knocks that the construction drone, knocks it off its pins, so it frees Roadblock. So. But it's a lot of fighting, and they're not making any ground is the problem. And let's see, Sci-Fi and Dana are trying to take out the command center for the computer drone, which they do. But as that happens, Gorky gets crushed, and his suit, remember they're in the vacuum of space, his suit gets tore open.
Yo, Joe!
So they're plugging the leak, probably using duct tape. But they have to get him in a shelter because that ain't gonna last long. And so it's what I like about this whole battle sequence is it's just stalemating. They're not really advancing. They're really not gonna save the day. There's a new horde of robots that are launching. Like, there's more robots. The Joes are really outnumbered. These robots aren't stopping. But then they get a call from it's actually Duke calls Payload, and he asks for some help.
Yo, Joe!
And while we wait to see what the result of that help is, we go back to Volcucu land, and we check in on Destro and Zartan, who Destro is fairly positive that they're out of gas. Like, he's deduced it, and he doesn't see any supply lines. Apparently, according to Zartan, they've captured all the fuel tankers at the border. So they're playing the waiting game, and so they're out. Destro advises waiting because we don't know for certain, but Cobra Commander does what, kids? Cobra Commander always steps on his own foot. He says, what are you talking about? Let's go get him. But Destro has to remind him, the longer we wait, we're going to be more certain that they're going to be out of gas. And now we find out that Mindbender and the Joes are aware of the activity on the asteroid. Did we know? I'm trying to think. Did they know about the asteroid? Because I know it was like the whole thing was, it was kind of quasi top secret. I can't remember if Cobra even knew about the asteroid before this. Interesting. I don't remember them knowing that. Maybe they did. Maybe that's not a bug. Maybe that's a feature.
Yo, Joe!
Yeah, Flint and Lady J. I like this, that the like Flint and Lady J are kind of the leads Joes in this, because we've had, Hawk and Stalker, in the other two issues, and then we just insert Flint and Lady J. So all of a sudden we have a Flint and Lady J focus issue. I think that's pretty neat. They're doing some scouting, and as they're heading back to the main camp, they bring with them Wolfgang, who had scooted out with that mess fund, as they like to say. And Wolfgang comes back with a bunch of fuel tankers. And he says, I slipped it back across the border to Darklonia and bought this stuff on the Darklonian black market. Of course, I had to forge your name, a letter of credit. And Flint says, and you just happen to pocket the change in cash. So everyone's still stealing, and that's funny, and I like that. I think there's a misplaced word balloon, because it's supposed to be, Wolfgang, but this drawing is definitely Flint. And it says it's supposed to be Wolfgang. So I think it's Flint saying General Leader Krantz, and then he says Wolfgang, and then it's Flint saying, where do you want me to park these fuel tankers? So that's supposed to be Wolfgang, not Flint. A little bit of an error, but you know what? It happens.
Yo, Joe!
Now the asteroid's hurtling towards Earth, and now there's some speed lines, which to me denotes atmosphere. So I think that's really smart. Previously, when we've seen it, it's been just like the actual asteroid, like floating in space. But now we're starting to see speed lines on the asteroid, which tells me it's entering Earth's atmosphere, which means it's getting even closer to Earth, and they have less and less time. And the Joes and the October Guard, they're all, it's Alamo, it's the end of Butch and Sundance. Even if only one of us makes it, we have to do this. And Dragonsky calls Red Star and Duke and says, put down your weapons. And Red Star says, never, we'll never give up. And he says, I'm not telling you to give up. This is Dragonsky. He says, the drones are programmed to react to armed humanoids. Put your weapons down and pick up tools.
Yo, Joe!
Duke says, the last thing a soldier wants to do when his back is to the wall is put down his piece, but we'll do it, and we will prevail. So all the Joes, everyone drops their guns, and they pick up these like laser borer weapons, or tools rather. Sorry, not weapons. But I do like, though, that they say just the same, I'm picking a tool that still can punch a hole through a drone if need be. And the Joes cautiously step out of cover to get not shot at. The drones are all standing down. They're just politely letting them go. There's no threatening moves, and they were able to walk into the control center. So it worked. The way that Phil lays this page out is really great. It starts with first long panel, like in the very foreground are all these tools, and in the rear are what Red Star and Duke are looking at, and so that kind of forces your eyes on these tools to like, it's kind of like a forced perspective if you were talking about a lens. Then you show just their hands picking up the tools. Then you get them in shadow, kind of moving out. And then it's that classic line of, you've seen this in movies, because you've seen this move in movies, right? Where they either, call truce or whatever. And then the one side kind of forms a quasi line while the other side walks through the middle, and the camera's right in the middle at worm's eye view. It's like right at the foot view. So it's looking up, and all the Joes are walking down this line. And that's what you get here. It's nicely played. I like it.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, back on Earth, that's funny. Cobra has now started the attack because they realize these guys are out of gas. except they're not out of gas. Cobra Commander says, Destro, I thought you said that the tanks of the pernicious porcine poltroon Liederkranz were going to be out of fuel. Destro says, permit me to remind the August Cobra Commander just whose decision was it to move up the attack. So once again, Cobra Commander not waiting it out is now leading to his premature doom.
Yo, Joe!
Simple matter of patience would have secured the field at no cost whatsoever. And Destro and Cobra Commander are yelling at each other. While this is happening, Lady J sneaks up and slaps a shaped charge on the side of the tank that Cobra Commander's in, which Mindbender happens to actually notice, but just only in time to save him and Cobra Commander as they leap off it. And so it's like a little bit of like infield sabotage by Flint and Lady J. It's nice work. I like this explosion too. It's a fun explosion. Lots of strange body angles, but yet still conforming to like good anatomy and stuff. Like this explosion that they do is really solid.
Yo, Joe!
Now up on the asteroid, everyone's still making it through. Everyone's smiling. They get into the main, like the main control chamber, and this is neat. There are no controls, and someone, or I think it's Roadblock, points out that it makes sense if the whole asteroid was going to be built and operated by drones. They didn't really need manual controls, so that's a nice detail that I thought was smart for Larry to put in there. But that means everyone has to search for some kind of manual control. They said the initial design was by a human being. There must be a manual override. And sure enough, Dinah finds an unmarked red button. I like this thinking. It must be the self-destruct. But what if? And Duke basically says, just what if there's no delay timer? That's the chance we have to take. So they're going to hit this self-destruct button, having absolutely no idea if they're going to live.
Yo, Joe!
So here goes nothing. And they hit it. And when they do, all these TV screens pop to life. And it's that crazy Russian guy. He says, congratulations. If you've entered this room, then you have entered it unarmed. And perhaps there is still some hope for humanity. This asteroid will self-destruct in 5 minutes. Good luck. Because remember, he was cuckoo about war. And, you know, he thought that the escalation of military was just driving everyone to pot. So that's what this asteroid was going to do. So now the Joes have 5 minutes to run and get to the shuttle, and let's hope that it's functional. So they're all running, and really, like, 5 minutes, they've got a lot of ground to cover. Let's put it that way.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, back on Earth, some nice rendering of nighttime battle here. There's explosions in the distance that's kind of illuminating it, but your leads are in shadows. The detonators will flank them. It's turning into a rout, and they realize that the Joes realize they have to destroy whatever ordnance or troops left behind so that they don't just resupply Cobra with it. And they destroy their own resources as they flee. Hawk says they can't afford to waste time to see if the Liederkranz made it. We have to save what's left of the army. Wolfgang also among the missing. Flint says the little weasel's probably going through the general's dead pockets. He doesn't say dead, but he says pockets. I'm assuming he meant dead.
Yo, Joe!
They get on an Ostriker, and before they can flee, here comes Liederkranz and Wolfgang. Wolfgang's carrying Liederkranz. He says, almost there, General. So he does a good job, and it's hilarious. So they save the guy who was a big oaf, and then Wolfgang collapses into Flint's arms, and then Liederkranz's wallet falls out of Wolfgang's pants. So Wolfgang still took the opportunity to pickpocket Liederkranz, and he claims he was keeping it safekeeping. That's a real fun bit.
Yo, Joe!
And on the asteroid, here comes the Russian shuttle, Dragansky and payload. It comes flying now. It's roaring at the Joes. I don't know how it stopped in time to get them, but it does. The Joes leap on it. This is a real defying physics rendering of the shuttle, but it's cool. And the Joes leap on the shuttle as it's kind of hovering there, I guess. And they strap in for a takeoff, punch it, Dragansky. We have to get as much distance as possible, and the space shuttle roars off into space.
Yo, Joe!
To a gigantic explosion. Space shuttle is safe. Everyone is good. But the shuttle itself is not as aerodynamic as it used to be. So there's going to be a lot of friction as it's making its way into the atmosphere. And they're glowing. They're already glowing red.
Yo, Joe!
And on Earth, they see the big explosion. The Joes in Volcuku land see the explosion. They say that they hope our guys made it off that thing before it exploded. They see the falling star, make a wish. So we assume that's the Joes safe and sound. However, maybe they're burning up in the atmosphere. I don't know the answer to that. We'll find out next issue. Since Roadblock was amongst that crew, I'm going to bet that they're okay. Actually, Roadblock and Duke, I'm going to bet that they're okay. If it was just like Payload and Dragonsky, they might have been dead. But, Duke and Roadblock, they'll finally be okay. Now we've got Postbox from the Pit. More letters, more hyping up G.I. Joe 150, which we are just 2 weeks away from. We got letters from Brian Deaver out of Upper Arlington, Ohio. Heather McNair out of New Zealand. That's exciting. Rob Wilson out of Santa Clara, California. Chris Smith out of Sellersburg, Indiana. And Chris Connolly out of Dearborn, Michigan. So next issue, the final pieces fall into place, courtesy of Larry, Phil, and Chip. Pieces of what? I don't really know, because it's, I guess, maybe Cuckoo Land story. Because that's really the only story that's wrapped up, unless there is more to, like, will they survive the shuttle crash? But exciting. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope you guys enjoyed the X-Men mashup idea as much as I did. So remember, hit hashtag XJoe on Twitter, and let's see what we can think of, because I think it totally works. And I hope you guys are great. Have a wonderful week. Now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.